Jake Miller wiped the grease off his hands and checked the time on his wrist device. Another 12-hour shift hauling cargo containers across the station was finally done. His back ached, his boots were scuffed, and all he wanted was a hot meal in his bunk. But Valara was waiting for him outside the loading bay, her forearms crossed and her expression unreadable. Valara was one of the Vex people, tall and elegant with smooth purple skin that shimmered under the station lights. She worked in the administrative section while Jake did the grunt work. They'd been friendly for months, sharing lunch breaks and complaining about their respective supervisors. But 3 weeks ago, she'd stopped talking to him completely. Now here she was, looking nervous. "We need to go to medical," she said without greeting. Jake frowned. "What? Why? I'm fine. Just tired." "Not for you. For me. I need you to come with me." Her voice was tight, almost pleading. "Valara, what's going on?" She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I'm pregnant. And there's a chance the child might be yours." Jake's brain stuttered to a halt. He stared at her, trying to process what she just said. "That's not possible. We never. I mean, humans and Vex can't even." "I know how it sounds," she interrupted. "But there was that night at the station festival. We both had too much solar wine. I don't remember everything clearly. The medical staff said it's rare but not impossible with genetic compatibility treatments. I just need to know for certain." Jake ran a hand through his hair. This couldn't be happening. He was nobody special, just a cargo hauler trying to save enough credits to maybe start his own small transport business someday. A kid? With an alien? His mind raced through the implications while Valara watched him with those large, golden eyes. "Okay," he finally said. "Let's go get this sorted out." The medical station occupied 3 levels of the habitat ring. They took the transit tube in silence, Valara fidgeting with her sleeve while Jake tried to calm his racing heart. The waiting room was clean and sterile, filled with beings from a dozen different species. A small reptilian child clung to their parent's leg while a gelatinous blob creature pulsed softly in a containment chair. A medical technician called them back within minutes. The exam room was standard issue, all white surfaces and humming equipment that Jake didn't understand. The doctor was a Vex male named Zulvan, older with silver streaks in his purple skin. He regarded Jake with professional curiosity. "A human Vex paternity test," Zulvan said, tapping notes into his datapad. "Unusual but straightforward. We'll need a genetic sample from you, Mr. Miller. Just place your hand on this scanner." Jake did as instructed. The scanner was a smooth black panel that warmed slightly under his palm. A soft blue light pulsed beneath his skin, and he felt a gentle tingling sensation. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds. "That's it?" Jake asked. "That's it. The Imperial Medical Database will cross-reference your genetic markers with the child's developing profile. Results in just a moment." Zulvan turned to his display screen. Valara reached over and squeezed Jake's hand. He squeezed back, both of them nervous. Whatever happened next, they'd figure it out together. Then the alarm started. Sharp, blaring klaxons that made Jake's ears ring. Red lights flashed across every surface in the room. The door hissed shut automatically and locked with a heavy clunk. Zulvan stumbled backward from his console, his face going pale. "What's happening?" Valara shouted over the noise. "I don't know." Zulvan's hands flew across his controls. The scanner triggered a priority alert. Level 1 security lockdown. Jake's heart hammered in his chest. "Is something wrong with my DNA? Am I sick? Contaminated?" "No, it's not that. It's..." Zulvan trailed off, staring at his screen like he'd seen a ghost. "This can't be right. This is impossible." Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Jake heard shouting, the sharp commands of security forces mobilizing. The door burst open and 6 armed Imperial guards stormed in, weapons raised. Their armor was polished black, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. "Step away from the human," the lead guard barked. Jake raised his hands instinctively. Whoa, what's going on? I just came in for a medical test." "You're under arrest by order of Imperial Command." The guard's weapon didn't waver. "Do not resist." "Arrest? For what?" Zulvan's voice came out as barely a whisper, but in the sudden quiet after the alarm stopped, everyone heard him clearly. "The scanner identified markers in your DNA. Genetic sequences that match the Founder's code. The original bloodline of the first Galactic Emperor." Jake blinked. "The what?" "According to these readings," Zulvan continued, his voice shaking, You possess genetic material from the imperial line that founded this empire 50,000 years ago. Your purity score is 94%. He looked up at Jake with something like awe and terror mixed together. The current emperor's purity score is 12%. The lead guard moved closer. Under ancient succession law, this human has a legal claim to the imperial throne. He must be brought before the High Council immediately. Jake's legs felt weak. This is insane. I'm from Earth. I'm nobody. My parents were factory workers in Detroit. There's been some kind of mistake. The Imperial medical scanner doesn't make mistakes, the guard said coldly. You're coming with us. As they pulled him toward the door, Jake looked back at Valara. She stood frozen, her hand still extended from where she'd been holding his. Her expression was complicated, fear and shock and something else he couldn't quite read. Jake, she called out as the guards hauled him into the corridor. I'm sorry. But he was already gone, surrounded by armored soldiers, his mind reeling. 1 minute he'd been a simple cargo hauler worried about maybe being a dad. Now apparently he was connected to some ancient alien royalty. As they marched him through the station, other workers stopped and stared. Word was already spreading. He could see it in their faces. Everything had just changed. And Jake had the terrible feeling that his quiet, simple life was over forever. The transport ship that carried Jake from the medical station wasn't like the cramped cargo haulers he was used to. This was an imperial vessel, all polished metal and soft lighting, with guards stationed at every door. They'd given him clean clothes, formal gray and black that felt too stiff, too important. He sat in a small cabin, hands clasped together, trying to make sense of what was happening. 24 hours ago, his biggest worry was whether he could afford new boots. Now he was flying toward the imperial palace to face an emperor. An emperor who apparently had less claim to the throne than Jake did. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It had to be some kind of cosmic joke. The palace was beyond anything Jake had imagined. It rose from the center of the capital city like a mountain made of crystal and light, thousands of years old, home to the rulers who'd governed the galaxy since before humans even knew fire. Guards escorted him through corridors so vast his footsteps echoed. Everywhere he looked, he saw wealth and power that made Earth's grandest buildings look like storage sheds. They brought him to a circular chamber with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Sitting in a semicircle were 12 beings, each representing the most powerful species in the Empire. The High Council. At the center sat someone Jake assumed was Emperor Draxon himself, wearing robes that seemed to shimmer with their own light. His skin was deep blue, his eyes ancient and cold. Jake Miller of Earth, Draxon's voice boomed across the chamber. Do you understand why you've been brought before us? Jake swallowed hard. Not really, sir. I mean, Your Majesty. I was told my DNA matched something it shouldn't, but I don't understand how that's possible. One of the council members leaned forward, an elderly being with too many eyes and a voice like rustling paper. Tell us about your family, human. Your parents. Your grandparents. Any history you know. My parents were Tom and Linda Miller. They worked at an auto factory in Detroit. They died 5 years ago in a transport accident. My grandparents on both sides, all human, all from Earth. Nothing special about any of them. We were just regular people. Another council member spoke, this one female with crystalline skin. No stories of adoption? No gaps in your family history? No. I've got pictures going back 3 generations. All human. All boring. Draxon gestured to someone standing in the shadows. Bring forward the Keeper of Records. An ancient creature shuffled into the light. Its body was hunched, covered in what looked like living moss, and it moved with the careful slowness of extreme age. This was Orweth, and when it spoke, its voice was surprisingly strong. 50,000 years ago, Orweth began. The first emperor did not merely rule this galaxy. He sought to ensure his legacy would never truly die. He conducted experiments across hundreds of worlds, seeding his genetic material into developing species. Most of these experiments failed. Some succeeded partially. But there was one world, one project, that he considered his greatest work. Jake felt a cold sensation in his stomach. The planet was designated Sol 3 in the old records. You know it as Earth. Orweth pulled up a holographic display showing star charts that shifted and changed. The first emperor found primitive beings there, early humans, and he did something unprecedented. He didn't just add his DNA. He fundamentally altered your species' evolutionary path, guiding it, nurturing it, and coding his genetic legacy into your very foundation. That's impossible, Jake said. Human evolution is documented. We came from apes, from natural selection over millions of years. Guided natural selection, Orweth corrected. The Emperor's technology worked slowly, invisibly, across thousands of generations. By the time humans developed civilization, you'd forgotten you were anything but natural. The Emperor intended it that way. Earth was to be a genetic reservoir, a backup for imperial succession hidden so well that no one would find it until the time was right. Draxon's voice cut through. But then the First Empire collapsed. Civil war tore apart everything the Emperor built. In the chaos, Earth's location was lost. For 12,000 years, we thought the experiment had failed, that the records were fantasy. Until you walked into that medical station, another council member added. Until the scanner found what shouldn't exist. Pure imperial bloodline, stronger than anything we've seen in millennia. Jake shook his head. This doesn't make any sense. If this is true, why me? Why not my parents, or my grandparents, or millions of other humans? Orweth manipulated the hologram, bringing up complex genetic charts that Jake couldn't begin to understand. The imperial genes are recessive, dormant in most humans. They require specific combinations to activate fully. Your parents each carried fragments. When combined in you, those fragments assembled into something complete. You are, genetically speaking, closer to the first emperor than anyone alive. The law is absolute, Draxon said, and there was an edge to his voice now. Imperial succession follows the purest bloodline. My family has ruled for 200 generations, but our genetic connection to the founder has diluted over time. Your connection is 94% pure. Mine is 12%. Under the ancient codes that still govern this empire, you have a legal claim that supersedes mine. Jake stood there, legs shaking, trying to process information that seemed designed to break his brain. I don't want your throne. I don't want any of this. I just want to go back to my job, to my life. Too late for that, said a female council member with sympathy in her voice. The genetic scan results have already leaked. Half the noble houses in the empire know about you. Some will see you as a threat. Others as an opportunity. War is coming, Jake Miller, whether you want it or not. War? There are factions who believe the old laws are sacred, Orweth explained. They will demand you take the throne. Others believe the laws are outdated, that genetic purity shouldn't matter. And there are those who will simply try to kill you to prevent the chaos your existence represents. As if to punctuate that point, alarms suddenly blared through the palace. Guards rushed to defensive positions. One of them shouted into a communication device while another pulled Jake behind a protective barrier. What's happening? Jake demanded. Assassins, the guard replied grimly. They breached the outer defenses. Probably targeting you. Explosions echoed somewhere in the distance. Jake heard weapons fire, screaming. The council members were being evacuated through hidden doors. Draxon remained seated, watching Jake with an expression that was hard to read. You see, the Emperor said quietly. Your very existence threatens the stability of an empire that has stood for 50 millennia. Noble houses are already choosing sides. My own military is divided. Some will follow tradition and support your claim. Others will follow me. And some will simply fight to survive the civil war that's beginning. More explosions, closer now. The guards formed a protective circle around Jake, their weapons raised. One of them was hit by weapons fire from down a corridor and crumpled. Jake had never seen anyone die before. His hands were shaking. A female guard grabbed his arm. We need to move you to a secure location. Now. They ran through corridors as the palace shook around them. Jake could hear fighting everywhere, see smoke rising. They burst into a small transport bay where a sleek ship was waiting. As they hustled him aboard, Jake caught a glimpse of Valara standing near the entrance, watching. Their eyes met for a brief second. She raised one hand in a small wave. Then the ship's door closed and they were launching, escaping into space while the palace burned behind them. Jake sat in the passenger hold, breathing hard, his world completely shattered. Yesterday he'd been nobody. Today he was apparently the rightful heir to a galactic empire, and people were dying because of it. He looked down at his hands, ordinary human hands, and wondered what genetic code hidden in his cells could possibly be worth all this blood. The safe house was on a remote moon orbiting a gas giant nobody cared about. Jake spent 3 days in a windowless room with guards outside his door, eating bland food and trying to wrap his head around everything that had happened. On the 4th day, they came for him. Not to kill him this time, but to educate him. The council had decided. Whether Jake wanted it or not, He was now a player in the biggest political crisis the Empire had faced in thousands of years. 3 scholar priests arrived, ancient beings who'd spent their lives studying imperial lore and history. They sat him down at a table and began what they called his essential instruction. "You cannot refuse the throne," the first priest explained patiently. "The genetic revelation triggered automatic succession protocols embedded in imperial law. These protocols are older than most civilizations. They cannot be ignored or bypassed." Jake rubbed his tired eyes. "So what? I'm just stuck. I have to be emperor whether I want to or not." "The law recognizes your claim," the second priest said. "But claiming the throne and holding it are different matters. Right now, the Empire is fracturing into factions. You must understand what each wants." They showed him holographic displays of the political landscape. It looked like a nightmare. The traditionalist faction supported Emperor Draxon. They argued the old succession laws were outdated, that 10,000 years of stable rule under Draxon's family mattered more than genetic purity. Most of the military backed them, along with the wealthiest noble houses who didn't want change. The purist faction wanted Jake on the throne. They claimed the founder's bloodline was sacred, that only genetic legitimacy mattered. But as the priests explained, these nobles didn't actually care about Jake. They saw him as a puppet they could control. A human with no knowledge of imperial politics would be easy to manipulate. The reformist faction was more complicated. They didn't want Jake or Draxon. They wanted to use this crisis to abolish the monarchy entirely, to create some kind of democratic council system. They saw Jake's claim as proof the whole imperial system was broken. "So everyone wants to use me," Jake said bitterly. "Nobody actually cares what I want." "Welcome to politics," the third priest said with something that might have been sympathy. "But there's more you need to understand. Come." They led him to a meditation chamber and had him sit in a strange chair that connected to his temples with thin silver wires. "What is this?" "The imperial genetic code doesn't just carry bloodline," the first priest explained. "It carries memory. Fragmented, incomplete, but present. We're going to try to access it." Before Jake could protest, they activated the device. His vision went white, then suddenly he was somewhere else. He stood in a throne room he'd never seen but somehow recognized. His hands weren't his own, they were larger, different. He looked down at robes of impossible material that shifted colors like living light. People, no, beings of every conceivable species bowed before him. He felt power, certainty, the weight of ruling a galaxy. Then the vision shifted. He was in a laboratory, watching primitive humans hunt on an African plain. He felt satisfaction, anticipation. These creatures had such potential. With guidance, with his genetic gift, they could become something magnificent. A backup plan. A safeguard against the Empire's inevitable corruption. The vision shattered. Jake gasped, back in his own body, his own time. Sweat poured down his face. What was that? "Genetic memory," the priest said. "Fragments of the first Emperor's consciousness, encoded in your DNA. As the succession protocols activate, these memories will become stronger. You'll start remembering things you never experienced. Learning languages you never studied. Understanding concepts that should be beyond you." Over the next week, Jake found it was true. Ancient words would slip into his mind unbidden. He'd look at star charts and instinctively know trade routes he'd never studied. It was disturbing, like someone else was slowly waking up inside his head. Meanwhile, the galaxy was tearing itself apart. News feeds showed protests on dozens of worlds. Fleet movements as battle groups chose sides. 2 minor skirmishes had already happened between ships loyal to different factions. People were dying over Jake's DNA, and he felt helpless to stop it. Then Earth got involved. A delegation arrived from the United Nations, led by an older woman named Director Catherine Hayes. She had gray hair, sharp eyes, and the exhausted look of someone who'd been in emergency meetings for days straight. "Mr. Miller," she said, sitting across from him in the safe house common room. "Do you have any idea what you've done to Earth?" "I didn't do anything," Jake protested. "I just took a medical test. And now humanity is either the most important species in the galaxy or the most hated, depending on who you ask." She pulled up footage on her datapad. Protests on Earth. Some humans celebrating, waving flags, chanting about galactic dominance. Others terrified, burning Jake in effigy, blaming him for painting a target on their entire planet. "The traditionalist faction is making noise about Earth being a genetic contamination site," Hayes continued. "They're saying the first Emperor's experiments violated natural evolution, that humanity is an abomination that should be quarantined or worse. Meanwhile, the purists are trying to claim all humans as imperial property. We've got 3 different alien fleets positioned near our solar system, and we have no idea if they're protecting us or preparing to invade. Jake felt sick. What do you want me to do? Refuse the throne. Publicly. Make it clear you have no interest in imperial politics. Let this crisis blow over without dragging Earth into a galactic civil war. I've tried. The law won't let me refuse. Then break the law, Hayes said intensely. Run. Hide. Disappear. Just stop being the center of this mess before it kills millions of people. Before it destroys Earth. Jake wanted to. Every fiber of his being wanted to run away, to go back to being nobody. But before he could answer, alarms blared again. The guards rushed in, weapons ready. What now? Jake asked, already knowing it wouldn't be good. Incoming transmission, a guard reported. It's being broadcast across every channel in the Empire. You need to see this. They pulled up the feed. Emperor Draxon's face filled the screen, addressing the entire galaxy. People of the Empire, Draxon said, his voice grave. For weeks we have been paralyzed by crisis. The revelation of the human's genetic claim has divided us when we most need unity. I have therefore made a decision. Jake's heart pounded. I am stepping down from the throne, effective immediately. However, I issue this challenge to Jake Miller of Earth. If you truly wish to change this empire, you must first prove you can lead it. Take the throne for a trial period of 10 solar cycles. Show us what your so-called pure bloodline can accomplish. After that time, the galaxy will vote on whether to continue the monarchy or establish a new system entirely. The transmission ended. Silence filled the room. Director Hayes looked at Jake with something like pity. He just backed you into a corner. If you refuse now, you look like a coward. The purists will claim you're unworthy. The reformists will say you've wasted their chance for change. And the traditionalists will use it as proof the old laws are meaningless. And if I accept? Then you're emperor of a galaxy that's already at war with itself. Either way, Earth is in danger because of you. Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the alien stars. Just 2 weeks ago, he'd been hauling cargo, dreaming of saving enough credits for his own ship. Now the fate of trillions rested on decisions he didn't know how to make. A soft voice came from the doorway. There might be another option. Everyone turned. A young woman stood there, human, with dark skin and bright, intelligent eyes. She wore the casual clothes of a civilian, but something about her presence commanded attention. Who are you? Jake asked. My name is Rebecca Okonkwo. I'm a xenoarchaeologist. I've been studying ancient sites on Earth for 5 years, and I found something. Something that might change everything you think you know about why you exist. Rebecca Okonkwo spread her research across the table while everyone gathered around. Director Hayes looked skeptical, the guards confused, but Jake leaned in close. Something about this woman's intensity told him she wasn't crazy, even if what she was saying sounded impossible. For the past 5 years, I've been studying megalithic structures around Earth, Rebecca began, pulling up images of ancient sites. Stonehenge. The pyramids. Göbekli Tepe. Structures that predated known civilization. Every archaeologist knows these places are special, but nobody could explain certain patterns we kept finding. Geometric alignments that seemed too precise. Stone compositions that didn't match local geology. And symbols that appeared across multiple sites separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. She zoomed in on a series of carvings. They looked almost like circuit diagrams mixed with organic shapes. I thought they were just ancient art. Then 3 months ago, I attended a lecture on xenobiology. They showed examples of genetic sequencing patterns used by advanced alien civilizations. And I recognized them. Jake's breath caught. These symbols are genetic code. Not just any genetic code. The same sequences that are in your DNA. The imperial markers. Rebecca pulled up a comparison chart. The ancient Earth symbols lined up perfectly with sections of Jake's genetic scan. The first emperor didn't just alter human evolution. He left messages. Instructions. Encoded into monuments that would survive for millennia, waiting for someone with the right genetics to understand them. That's fascinating, Director Hayes said slowly, but how does this help our current situation? Because 1 week ago, I finally translated the complete message. Rebecca's hands shook slightly as she pulled up her final analysis. The symbols from every major site, when properly sequenced, form coordinates. a location on Earth, and a genetic key signature that matches only one person currently alive. She looked directly at Jake. Only you can access whatever the first Emperor left behind. The room erupted in discussion. The scholar priest demanded to see her research. Director Hayes called her team for verification. The guards argued about security protocols. Through it all, Jake stared at the coordinates on the screen. Antarctica, he said quietly. That's in Antarctica. Rebecca nodded. Under 3 miles of ice. The structure's been there for at least 50,000 years, perfectly preserved. I've known about it for a week but couldn't figure out how to access it. Then I heard about you on the news feeds and everything clicked into place. This could be a trap, one of the guards warned. The purist faction would do anything to control him. This could be bait. Or it could be the answer, Jake said. He looked at Rebecca. You really think there's something down there? Something that could help? I think the first Emperor planned for this moment. He knew his empire would eventually decay, become corrupt. Why else leave a genetic failsafe? Why else hide instructions that only his heir could find? Rebecca's eyes blazed with conviction. Whatever's in that vault, it was meant for you specifically. For this exact situation. Director Hayes made a decision. We'll send a team. Full security detail, scientists, and observers from Earth's government. If this is real, humanity deserves to know what's on our own planet. 2 days later, Jake stood on the ice of Antarctica, wind howling around the small research base they'd established. The structure was buried deep, but ground-penetrating radar showed its outline clearly. Something massive and definitely not natural. The excavation took another 3 days of careful drilling. When they finally broke through to a chamber, the air that escaped was stale but breathable, preserved perfectly for 50,000 years. Jake, Rebecca, and a small team descended in an elevator that had been hastily installed. The walls of the underground structure glowed with soft blue light as they approached, responding to Jake's presence. Ancient technology, still functioning after all this time. They reached a massive door covered in the same symbols Rebecca had found on Earth's surface. This is it, she whispered. Put your hand on the center panel. Jake approached slowly. The door was easily 30 feet tall, made of a material that looked like metal but felt warm to the touch. He placed his palm against the central symbol. Pain lanced through his hand, up his arm. The door was taking a blood sample, reading his DNA. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light buzzed from every symbol, patterns racing across the door's surface. Ancient mechanisms groaned to life. The door split down the middle and swung open. Inside was a chamber that took Jake's breath away. The ceiling stretched up into darkness. The walls were lined with what looked like databanks, thousands of them, still glowing with power. And in the center of the room stood a holographic projector. It activated as they entered. A figure materialized above the projector, life-sized and impossibly detailed. Jake recognized him from the genetic memories. The first Emperor. He looked almost human, but not quite. Taller, with features that were too perfect, too symmetrical. His eyes held an intelligence that felt almost alien. If you're watching this, the hologram began, speaking in a language Jake somehow understood, then the protocols have activated. The Empire has reached a critical point of failure. And you, my genetic heir, must make a choice. The hologram walked around the chamber as if it were really there. I created this empire 50,000 years ago with noble intentions. Peace. Order. Progress for all species. But I was not naive. I knew that power corrupts, that systems decay. So I built in safeguards. Images appeared around the hologram, showing the seeding of different worlds. I created genetic heirs across dozens of species, each given specific traits. The Vex received strategic thinking. The Karath received physical strength. The humans? The Emperor smiled. You received something more valuable. Adaptability. Innovation. The ability to question authority and imagine alternatives. You were never meant to rule forever. You were meant to force change when the Empire became stagnant. Jake stepped closer to the hologram. Why me specifically? Why activate now? The genetic triggers activate when corruption reaches critical levels. When the Empire's leadership becomes more concerned with maintaining power than serving its people. When war seems inevitable because flexibility has been lost. The Emperor's expression grew serious. You were activated because the Empire is dying. It needs transformation or it will collapse into chaos that could last millennia. Rebecca moved to one of the databanks, her scanner working frantically. Jake, There's so much information here. Technology, history, political theory. It's like a complete manual for rebuilding civilization. There's more, the hologram said. Something I created as a last resort. A tool so powerful I hoped it would never be needed. Part of the floor slid away, revealing a chamber beneath. Inside was a device, crystalline and beautiful, pulsing with energy. Jake approached it carefully. This is a genetic override key, the Emperor explained. It can rewrite the DNA of any species I seeded with my genetic code. All of them. Billions of beings across the galaxy. With this, you could cure diseases, enhance abilities, or... He paused. Control them absolutely. Make them loyal to you without question. It was designed to defend against an existential threat to all life. But in the wrong hands, it's a weapon of unimaginable tyranny. Jake stared at the device, feeling sick. You're saying I could use this to force everyone to obey me? To accept me as Emperor? Yes. But doing so would make you the very corruption the system was designed to eliminate. The hologram looked directly at Jake with something like hope in its eyes. The test isn't whether you can seize power. It's whether you have the wisdom to use power correctly, or to reject it entirely. Director Hayes had been silent until now. This is insane. You're telling us the first Emperor gave humanity the potential to control most of the galaxy's species. He gave us a choice, Rebecca said softly, understanding dawning. That's the point. The test is what we choose to do. Alarms suddenly blared from the surface. One of the guards shouted into his communicator, then turned to Jake with fear in his eyes. We've got multiple fleets entering Earth's orbit. Traditionalist and purist forces. They're demanding we surrender you and the vault or they'll bombard the planet. Jake looked up at the ceiling, as if he could see through miles of ice to the warships above. Emperor Draxon had made his move. Force Jake's hand. Make him choose between surrender, hiding, or using the genetic weapon to fight back. How long do we have? Jake asked. They've given us 6 hours. After that, they start attacking population centers. The hologram flickered. My time is running out. The recording has nearly completed its purpose. But know this, my heir. I created you not to maintain my empire, but to transform it. Whatever you choose, choose with humanity's heart. That was always your species' greatest gift. The hologram faded. Jake stood in the ancient chamber, surrounded by technology beyond understanding, holding the power to reshape the galaxy. Outside, millions of people on Earth had no idea their fate rested on the decision of a former cargo hauler from Detroit. Rebecca touched his arm gently. What are you going to do? Jake looked at the genetic override device. So much power. So much temptation. He could force peace. Force obedience. End the threat to Earth instantly. Or he could prove the first Emperor right about humanity. Get me a communication link, Jake said finally. I'm not hiding anymore. It's time to face the Empire and show them what a human really does when given power. Jake stood on the ice of Antarctica, watching alien warships fill the sky above. They hung there like dark stars, weapons charged, waiting. 6 hours had become 4, then 2. Now he had 30 minutes left before they started shooting. Director Hayes kept urging him to evacuate, to take the genetic override device and run. But Jake had made his choice. Open a channel, he said calmly. Broadcast to every ship in orbit and every world in the Empire. I want everyone to hear this. The communication officer hesitated, then nodded. You're live, sir. Jake took a breath and spoke to a galaxy. My name is Jake Miller. 3 weeks ago, I was nobody. A cargo hauler who just wanted to earn an honest living. Then I took a medical test and apparently became the most important person in the Empire. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want it. But here we are. He could see his image being projected on screens across Earth, across space, on 1,000 different worlds. I've spent the last few weeks learning about imperial law, about genetic purity, about succession rights. And you know what I realized? The whole system is broken. Not because Emperor Draxon is a bad leader. Not because the purists are wrong about bloodlines mattering. But because we're all asking the wrong question. Jake started walking across the ice toward the research base, cameras following him. Everyone keeps asking who should rule. Who has the right to sit on a throne that's 50,000 years old? But nobody's asking why we still need that throne at all. Why are we letting ancient DNA decide the fate of trillions of living beings? Inside the base, he gestured for Rebecca to bring the records they'd copied from the vault. I found something in Antarctica. A message from the first emperor himself. Want to know what he said? He said the empire was never supposed to last forever. He built in genetic triggers specifically to force change when the system became corrupt. I'm not here to claim power. I'm here because the empire is dying and someone needs to be honest about it. He pulled up holographic images from the vault, showing them to the galaxy. The first emperor seeded dozens of species with his DNA. Not to create rulers, but to create agents of change. He gave each species different gifts. And you know what he gave humanity? The ability to question authority. To imagine alternatives. To choose cooperation over domination. A message came through from one of the orbiting ships. Emperor Draxon wanted to speak. Jake accepted the call. The Emperor's face appeared on the screen, measured and calm. Bold words, young human. But words won't stop this crisis. The Empire needs leadership, not philosophy. You're right, Jake agreed. So here's what I propose. You stepped down and challenged me to prove I could lead for 10 solar cycles, then let the galaxy vote on the future. I accept that challenge. But I'm changing the terms. Murmurs rippled through the communication channels. You couldn't just change an emperor's decree. I'll take the throne, Jake continued. But not as a traditional emperor. I'm going to spend those 10 cycles transforming how the empire works. Opening the genetic archive so every species knows their true origin. Creating councils where actual citizens have actual power. Redirecting military spending toward exploration and helping struggling worlds instead of maintaining control. He could see Draxon's expression tighten. You'd dismantle everything. I'd evolve everything. There's a difference. Jake pulled out the data crystal containing information about the genetic override device. I found something else in that vault. A weapon that could let me control every species the first emperor altered. I could use it right now to force everyone to obey me. To make this easy. Shocked silence across every channel. But I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to destroy it. Jake held up the crystal. Because the first emperor's test wasn't about whether I could seize power. It was about whether I had the wisdom not to. Power you take by force is worthless. Power that's freely given is the only kind worth having. He crushed the crystal under his boot. The genetic override codes, the ability to control billions of beings, shattered into fragments on the ice. Director Hayes looked like she might have a heart attack. Several of the guards gasped. But Jake felt lighter than he had in weeks. There, he said. No more shortcuts. No more genetic weapons. If I'm going to lead this empire, it'll be because people choose to follow me. Not because I forced them to. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Emperor Draxon did something unexpected. He smiled. You really are something different, aren't you? The Emperor's voice held a note of respect. Very well. The fleets will withdraw. We'll hold your trial period as agreed. But know this, Jake Miller. Transforming an empire that's 50,000 years old won't be easy. You'll face resistance from every corner. Noble houses will scheme against you. The military will test you. Half the species in the empire will think you're either too weak or too dangerous. I know, Jake said. But I'd rather try and fail doing the right thing than succeed doing the wrong thing. The warships began pulling back from Earth's orbit. The immediate crisis was over. But Jake knew the real work was just beginning. Over the next several months, Jake kept his word. He moved the imperial seat from the ancient palace to a new structure called the Unity Spire, designed with input from architects from 50 different species. He opened the genetic archives, broadcasting the truth about the first emperor's experiments. Some species were angry about being manipulated. Others were relieved to finally understand their history. He established the Council of Voices, where representatives from every species could debate policy and actually influence decisions. The first sessions were chaotic, full of arguments and cultural misunderstandings. But slowly, people started learning to work together. Jake redirected a third of the military budget toward what he called the Uplift Initiative. Ships that had been built for war now carried teachers, doctors, engineers to struggling worlds that had been ignored for centuries. It wasn't charity. It was investment in species that had never been given a real chance. Not everyone was happy. 3 noble houses tried to assassinate him in the first 6 months. The Karath military staged a brief rebellion that had to be put down. A dozen colony worlds declared independence, arguing that if humans could change everything, they could too. Jake let them go. If they don't want to be part of the empire, he said, that's their right. We're not building a prison. Through it all, Rebecca stayed by his side. Not as a romantic interest, though the media kept trying to make it that story. She became his chief advisor on everything related to the first emperor's legacy. Together they traveled to worlds across the empire, talking to regular citizens, learning what they actually needed instead of what politicians claimed they wanted. Valara reached out after 8 months. She apologized for using him, explained she'd been part of the reformist faction and had orchestrated the paternity test to get his DNA scanned. Her pregnancy had been fake, just a cover story. Jake forgave her. In a weird way, her deception had saved the galaxy from a civil war. They became friends, genuinely this time. Earth changed too. At first, many humans celebrated having one of their own in power. But Jake made it clear that humanity wasn't superior to other species. "We got lucky with genetics," he told angry crowds back home. "That doesn't make us special. What makes us special is what we choose to do with that luck." Some humans hated him for that. Others understood. Earth became known not as the ruler's homeworld, but as the mediation hub. Humans, with their outsider perspective and natural adaptability, became the galaxy's diplomats and negotiators. It wasn't glorious, but it was important. Finally, after 10 solar cycles, the vote came. Every citizen in the empire cast their choice. Continue the monarchy under Jake's reforms, or abolish it entirely and create a democratic federation. Jake stood in the Unity Spire watching the results come in. Director Hayes had flown out from Earth to be there. Rebecca stood next to him, calm as always. Even Emperor Draxon attended, having become an unexpected ally over the years. The results were close. 48% voted to keep the monarchy. 52% voted for the Federation. Jake had lost. Director Hayes looked worried. "What are you going to do?" Jake smiled and walked to the podium to address the Empire one final time as their emperor. "The people have spoken. And that's exactly how it should be. Starting today, the Galactic Empire becomes the Galactic Federation. Power will rest with elected councils, not inherited bloodlines. I'll transition my authority over the next 6 months, and then I'm stepping down." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. "But the treaty allows you to stay," someone shouted. 48% wanted you to continue. And 52% wanted something different, Jake replied. "Democracy means accepting when people disagree with you. It means putting their choice above your own preference. That's the whole point." Over the next 6 months, Jake oversaw the creation of the Federation Council, the drafting of a constitution that protected individual species' rights while maintaining unity. It was messy and complicated and sometimes frustrating. But it was real democracy, not the illusion of it. On his last day as emperor, Jake held a ceremony in the Unity Spire. Representatives from every species attended. He formally dissolved the imperial throne, smashing the ancient seal that had symbolized absolute authority for 50,000 years. "The first emperor created something amazing," Jake said. "But he knew it couldn't last forever. He designed me, designed humanity, to be the catalyst for change. Not to rule, but to transform. I think we did that. Now it's your turn to build something even better." He stepped down from the platform. For the first time in almost a year, he was just Jake Miller again. No guards. No throne. No genetic destiny. Rebecca walked up beside him. "So what now? Back to hauling cargo?" Jake laughed. "I was thinking about starting that transport business I always wanted. Small operation. Nothing fancy. Just honest work." "Sounds perfect." They walked out of the Unity Spire together while the galaxy celebrated its new beginning. Behind them, species that had been divided for millennia were learning to govern themselves, to cooperate without coercion, to build instead of merely maintain. And Jake, the cargo hauler who accidentally became emperor, went home to Earth with a clear conscience. He'd been given ultimate power and chosen to give it away. The first emperor had been right about humanity after all. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't holding on to power. It's knowing when to let it go.